Well, thank you everyone for coming. We're extremely excited to be hosting our annual Latke-Hamentaschen Debate. My name is Adam Charney. I'm president of the Whig-Clio Society. And first, let me just thank the CJL for co-sponsoring this event with us, and particularly Josh and Shira for all their hard work. We're extremely happy to have President Eisgruber with us today, who's going to be moderating the debate, as well as Professors Robert George and Julian Zeilzer, and our student debaters Alex Moss and Adam Mastroianni. History, as we know, is filled with many deep unanswered questions, such as what is the meaning of life? Was Barack Obama actually born in America? And when will it finally stop snowing in Princeton? But today we put all of that aside to debate the question of all questions, Latke-Hamentaschen. You laugh, but it's a question that has astounded scholars across I told you you'd laugh. But it's a question that astounds scholars across the country. Alan Dershowitz has argued that it has to be the Hamantaschen because Latke increases our dependence on oil.
That went my line.
Oh, did I? Oh, I'm so sorry. We both use Wikipedia, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't take Professor Zeilzer's line. MIT physicist Alan Adams has said that it has to be the Latke because evidence from the LHC and CERN, the Latke-Hamentaschen collider, has proved the Latke theory. So, I don't know, so I will leave it up to the experts. But for now, please join me in welcoming Josh Pitkoff, who's the president of the CJL, to introduce.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Pitkoff. I'm president of the CJL Student Board. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the annual Latke-Hamentaschen Debate. The very first Latke-Hamentaschen Debate occurred in 1946 at the University of Chicago. President Eisgruber graduated from the University of Chicago Law School. Coincidence? I think not. Because of this formative coincidence, President Eisgruber told his cabinet and advisors that the only suitable venue to celebrate his installation would be the Latke-Hamentaschen Debate. Unfortunately, it took until now to happen. We can all no, I read that wrong. I'll do that again. But we can all sleep easier tonight, knowing that the 20th president of the university will have, at long last, completed the final step in the process of his inauguration. I emailed the office of the president, hoping he would be able to participate, and received the following response. I'm deeply honored by your invitation to moderate this august and timeless intellectual debate. Mr. President, the honor is all ours. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, President Eisgruber.
Thank you. Well, Josh, thank you for that introduction, and I am indeed deeply honored to be a part of this very august debate that allows me to draw upon two distinct aspects of my personal heritage and identity, my relatively recently discovered Jewish identity, and my less recently discovered identity as a graduate of the University of Chicago. But despite having these two characteristics in my background, I confess that I had not previously attended the Latke-Hamentaschen Debate, either here or at Chicago, and feeling a need to prepare in order to do this suitably well, I went to that vast scholarly archive known as YouTube. And after consulting YouTube, what I discovered was that at the University of Chicago, this is a very august event at which the faculty debaters enter to music while dressed in full academic regalia, which seemed like a good idea to me. And indeed, earlier today, Professor George inquired whether or not the faculty members on this panel ought to don academic regalia for the debate today. The matter was discussed. It was decided that we would not, because another faculty debater, who shall remain nameless, professed not to have any academic regalia which you get, by the way, when you get your doctoral degree. But I think it nevertheless important here to uphold and perhaps start a trend in the decorum of this event. So I have, from the University of Chicago, this important piece of academic regalia, which I shall wear for the remainder of my remarks. I will tell you it is a major goal of my administration to have more latkes, more Hamantaschen, and more academic regalia. Now, the Chicago roots of this tradition are well known. Less well known are the Princeton roots, and obviously as the president of this university and someone very concerned with Princeton traditions, I immediately began doing research to find what sorts of ties this debate might have to Princeton, including asking the question, which I had never previously asked, of who was the first Jewish faculty member to be appointed at Princeton University. This question actually took me back, as many things Princetonian do, to Woodrow Wilson, who appointed the first Jewish faculty member of this university in 1903, Horace Meyer Callan. In what may be typical of Princeton University, he appointed the first Jewish professor accidentally, not knowing that he was Jewish. In his magisterial biography of Woodrow Wilson, my friend and colleague Scott Berg says politely afterwards that 2 years after his appointment in 1903, Horace Meyer Callan had his contract not renewed. His contract was not renewed by the university. Other sources say that in 1905 his contract was not renewed because either Princeton had discovered that he was Jewish or Princeton discovered that he was atheist or both. Unfortunately, this seems all too true of Princeton at the time. I will note here in passing that I had thought when I went back to discover the first Princeton professor who was Jewish that I might discover somebody relatively obscure. But it turns out, and I don't know whether any of you recognize the name, that Horace Meyer Callan was in fact one of the rather distinguished philosophers of the 20th century. He was originally appointed here as a lecturer in English, but went on to become one of the leaders of the American Zionist movement. So the roots of American Zionism run through the Princeton Department of English. The Department of English, who knew? He's credited with developing the term cultural pluralism as a critique of the idea of the melting pot, meaning that you could be a good American while retaining your cultural identity by, for example, insisting on the importance of a debate about the latke and the Hamantaschen. Horace Meyer Callan lasted only 2 years on the Princeton faculty, but I think that if he knew that today there was a debate on this campus being moderated by a non-theistic Jewish president about the latke and the Hamantaschen, he would be cavelling. Now, all of this, implausible though some of it may seem, all of this is well documented in one place or another. Less well known are Wilson's own unsuccessful efforts to establish the Latke-Hamentaschen debate during his presidency at Princeton. This is described in an unpublished chapter of Scott Berg's magisterial biography, apparently left on the cutting room floor in order to comply with the publisher's highly confining 750-page limit for the biography. Berg notes, and I'll leave you to decide which parts of this are true and which are speculative. Berg notes that Wilson was himself a skillful debater and in fact rose to the position of the Speaker of the Whig Society, housed in this very building. Tommy Wilson, as he was known at the time on the campus, was elected Speaker, so creating a new debate was a natural for Wilson. If I have correctly interpreted the unpublished and heretofore unseen chapter by Mr. Berg on this subject, Wilson apparently conceived of the debate as a device to diversify the faculty and add to its quality by attracting professors of the renown those on stage today. Unfortunately, the plan faltered because the eating clubs mistakenly thought that Wilson was trying to undermine their status by promoting Jewish delicacies that they were unable to prepare for students. And they regarded the Latke-Hamentaschen debate as part of Wilson's scheme to put in place residential colleges. The clubs combined with the trustees to sack Wilson and put the kibosh on his plans to originate the Latke-Hamentaschen debate at Princeton, thereby yielding the field to the University of Chicago. Fortunately, William's dream would be realized a century later by the students of the Center for Jewish Life. He would undoubtedly be excited to see the debaters who are on stage this evening, so let me now introduce them to you. Beginning with Dr. Robert P. George of the Hamantaschen team. Dr. George is renowned as an accomplished bluegrass banjo player. If you do not believe that, check the vast scholarly archive known as YouTube, where his achievements are documented. He teaches constitutional interpretation, where he is well known for giving students low grades and getting high evaluations. If Professor George gave students high grades, we would have to invent a new evaluation system. Given the previously unknown Wilsonian origins of this debate, it is fitting that Dr. George is the current occupant of the prestigious chair held by Wilson himself, the McCormick Professorship of Jurisprudence. The professor leading the Latke team is Dr. Julian Zeilzer. He was almost literally born to participate in this debate. His mother is a Princeton professor, and his father is a fourth-generation rabbi. Plus, he is a prominent commentator who appears almost continuously in all variety of news media. Like Professor George, Professor Zeilzer can claim to be an inheritor of Woodrow Wilson's legacy since he studies Congress, which was the focus of Wilson's famous book, Congressional Government. He is the Malcolm S. Forbes Class of 41 Professor of History and Public Affairs. They are joined on stage by two outstanding student debaters who are very confusing to introduce. They have exactly the same initials. They were both head writers for The Triangle Show. They are both Class of 14, and they both appear on the late-night talk show All Nighter with David Drew. Adam Mastroianni, on the Latke team, hails from Monroeville, Ohio. In all of his biographical material, he emphasizes that Monroeville has a population of 1,400. This fact is apparently very important to him. He is an RCA and a Rhodes Scholar. Alex Moss of the Hamantaschen team is from Long Island. His work has appeared, population unknown, but larger than 1,400. His work has appeared in the Daily Princetonian, Tiger Magazine, and the Nassau Weekly. He claims that he could beat Adam in a boxing match, and depending on how this debate goes, we may find out. So without further ado, I will now proceed to the ceremonial coin toss. So this is the, and I will ask Professor George, since he has academic regalia, to call the coin. This is a ceremonial coin with the Princeton insignia, which I will designate as heads. It's very heavy, so Adam, if I flip it in your direction, duck. And this will be the tails side of it. The team winning the toss decides which team goes first. This is sort of like football. Okay. Very complicated. Professor George, you got to call it while it's in the air, okay?
It's heads.
It's tails. So the Latke team gets to decide whether or not to start or receive.
I'll start. Since
okay. All right.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having us here. It's a pleasure to participate in this debate as the son of a rabbi, the grandson of a rabbi, the great-grandson of a rabbi. It's really a true pleasure to be here and to speak about these two pieces of Jewish cuisine that are very much part of my tradition. It is an honor to be having this with Adam and to be debating one of my most distinguished colleagues, Robbie George, one of the most prominent Catholic intellectuals in the country, and his partner, Alex. And to President Eisgruber, let me say, Shalom, Chaver. Today, I come and I speak to you at a very troubling time in American politics. Although there have always been divisions in the United States between Latke lovers and Hamantaschen huberists, in recent years, the political atmosphere has become more toxic, more poisonous, and more rancorous. While some have argued that supporters of each kind of food have veered toward the extremes, the latest social scientific research has demonstrated without question that Hamantaschen huberists have moved much farther to the extremes of the food spectrum. In recent years, Hamantaschen huberists in Congress have blocked progress on key measures like immigration reform. They've shut down the federal government, and they have threatened to send the nation into default, and they have called for deep cuts in the social safety net. Speaker of the House John Boehner, a leader of the Hamantaschen huberists, has been unable to maintain control of his caucus. I would like to ask you today to support the party of optimism and hope, the party that seeks to unite rather than to divide this nation. And there's no question in my mind that the Latke lovers offer us a better chance on this path. Why is this the case? First, Latke lovers believe in community. This is symbolized by the way we cook our food. Cooking the latke is really fun. It involves lots of people. Anyone who's participated in this tradition knows it's messy, it's chaotic, but it requires lots of different people to slice the potatoes, to taste, to fry, to put out all the food. Second, Latke lovers believe in pluralism. I'm glad that President Eisgruber brought up that important issue. With every delicious bite, we remember the values of pluralism, equality, and integration that are very much part of the American tradition. Cooking these delicious items is all about bringing different strands together. The cook must shred the potatoes into a million different pieces, but then, in the magic of the pan and the oil, the different strands of the potato come together, woven into the beautiful quilt of the latke. Compare that to the Hamantaschen, almost unwelcoming, stiff and formal. The baked part just sits on the plate, and the filling is put in just perfectly. Third, the latke is a constant reminder of the tradition of tikkun olam, repair the world. Today, we live in a period when inequality has continued to become worse. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, while the middle class struggles. There's really no better time to promote the latke than now. It's a powerful reminder of this battle. The tradition of eating the potato pancake came from Ashkenazi Jews in Eastern Europe in the 1800s, the home of many of the immigrants who came to the United States at the turn of the 20th century. Like my grandfather, Nathan Zeilzer, who later became a rabbi. In places like Poland, Jews used the potatoes because they were cheap and plentiful in contrast to most foods. So when we eat the latke, we remember the struggles that so many people have had to endure just to survive, and that we can't allow such conditions to endure. This is a stark contrast to Hamantaschen hubris such as Mitt Romney, who shocked many Americans by claiming that the 47% of Americans who he said were latke lovers are, quote, dependent on government. They believe they are victims. They believe that government has a responsibility to take care of them. And they will vote for this latke-loving president no matter what. Of course, speaking about President Obama. Finally, latke lovers believe in the politics of optimism. Nes gadol haya sham. A great miracle happened there. The latke comes from a Jewish holiday, Hanukkah, that celebrates optimism of the human spirit and the belief in survival and progress. The reason we cook the latke in oil is to remember the miracle of the oil that kept burning after the Maccabees had fought back against King Antiochus to protect Israel and the temple. They expected the oil to last one night, but it lasted much longer. Hamantaschen, a reference to Haman, who of course is the evil Purim figure, a person who wanted to destroy the Jews. We eat this to symbolize the defeat of the enemy, our success at putting down the villain. While with latke we celebrate survival and miracle, persistence, the possibility of a better future, with Purim, with the Hamantaschen, we just eat the enemy in an act of hawkish aggression. Unfortunately, there's also a very long history of Hamantaschen hubrists practicing a dirty style of politics that revolves around destructive scandal and innuendo. Although there are some upstanding Hamantaschen hubrists who work for principle, like my colleagues here at the panel, this is often not the case. This is why Hamantaschen hubris couldn't win a presidential election between 1932 and 64 other than the war hero Dwight Eisenhower, who secretly loved latkes, but couldn't say so for fear of being smeared by McCarthyite Hamantaschen extremists. While finishing my book on the Great Society, I recently found an interesting clip of President Lyndon Johnson, a well-known latke lover, talking to Vice President Hubert Humphrey, another Midwestern connoisseur of the potato pancake, talking about the politics of Hamantaschen hubris and how it led to their downfall. Here's a brief clip of this discussion.
Turn the other cheek, well, just say, well, the reason haven't won any elections except Eisenhower, and Eisenhower didn't mess around with this trash. He was a national hero. But the reason they haven't won since Hoover is because they spent all the time on Roosevelt's boy, Jimmy, and on his dog. And they spent all the time on Truman and Margaret and the music critics. And they spent all their time on Kennedy and his religion and other things. And they just got one, and if they don't stand for something, hell, if they just come out here and talk about revival of the corn tassel, or come out to Tom Watson watermelons, it'd be something. But they just, by God, against things, against everything, and trying to smear and fear. And that, you have no alternative. The Senator's Postal Statesman asked me today, he said, what frightens you most? I said, well, not any of them now. When one of them comes out and said, this is what I stand for, and give me a foreign policy, and said, here's what I'm for. And then he'd give me domestic policy and said, here's what I'm for. Here's what I'm for in the field of education, in the field of manpower, field of training, and field of civil rights. Then I'll get scared, because even if it's different from mine, they'll have a choice. But now they haven't any choice, because we're the only ones that stand for anything. They're just against things.
So I hope you'll join me in embracing the latke, picking the food of hope and optimism, not the one where you eat your enemy. Let me conclude by quoting President Barack Obama, who I mentioned is a latke lover, during his speech to the Democratic Convention in 2004, when he said, "There's not a latke America and a Hamantaschen America. There's a United States of America. The pundits like to slice and dice our country into Hamantaschen states and latke states, blue states and for latke lovers, and red states for Hamantaschen hubrists. But I've got news for them. We worship an awesome God in the latke states, and we don't like the federal agents poking around in our libraries in the Hamantaschen states. We coach little leagues in the latke states, and yes, we've got some gay friends in the Hamantaschen states." Please help bring America back together. Don't tear it further apart. Vote for the latke. Thank you.
Well, I am very honored, Joshua, by your kind invitation to participate, and especially to be here with our two young debaters, the AA, and to be in a debate that is moderated by our distinguished president, and to be up against the formidable young scholar, Professor Zeilzer. I really rather liked his visual aids. We become less dependent on those sorts of things, but at your age, it's perfectly appropriate. Now, our nation's semi-official second national motto is E pluribus unum, famously mistranslated by Sarah Palin as out of one, many, but correctly translated as precisely the reverse, out of many, one. No, wait. It wasn't Sarah Palin. It was, help me out, Julian. Al Gore. I always confuse them. Palin was the one who predicted Putin would invade Ukraine. That's right. Now, in any event, the problem of the one and the many, e pluribus unum, is a classic problem in both philosophy and political science. How can many be one? The humble Hamantaschen provides an answer, or at least an example. There are, after all, many fruits. The many fruits can be made into many fillings: prune, apricot, strawberry, raspberry, and on, just like the diversity, Julian, the pluralism of Americans coming from many lands, many faiths, many cultures. But just as the many are made one by our common foundation in the American creed, the splendid diversity of fruit fillings are made one in the concept and reality of the Hamantaschen. The foundation of their unity, it's that delicate, beautiful pastry. A pastry so Jewish that it is named for the pockets or ears of the vanquished tyrant Haman. And so American that its very shape recalls the tri-cornered hat of the patriots whose revolt against the tyranny of King George gave birth to our great nation. As Ed Koch would say, how do you like me so far? Now, what about the latke? First, let me say, for the sake of self-preservation and a bed to return to this evening, that nothing I say here today is to be construed as in any way casting so much as the slightest of aspersions on the delectable latkes made by my beloved wife at holiday times, nor on the magnificent latkes made by my esteemed mother-in-law, nor on those made by my sainted grandmother-in-law, may she rest in peace. In fact, I will not today resort to the low and unworthy debater's stratagem of defending the goodness of my side by impugning what it is the task of my esteemed friends on the other side to defend. So I will say nothing negative about the latke. The word oil will not so much as pass my lips, or the word oily. Nor will I mention any concerns about obesity or other health issues connected with the consumption of oily things fried in oil, if that is, I were to mention words like oil and oily, which I will not. Nor will I sink so low as to note that we should be doing everything we can, including on the dietary front, and here I stand with Professor Dershowitz, to lessen our dependence on foreign oil, especially oil from places that I will not mention, since it would be a low blow to mention them. Places that, were I to mention them, would have names like Saudi Arabia and Iran. Not that I'm mentioning them, mind you. But let us return to the splendors and wonders of the simple Hamantaschen. You may ask, How can something so simple, so humble, be splendid and wonderful? Another paradox, a mystery, like the mystery of Moses, simply striking a humble rock, and splendidly and wonderfully outflowed humble water, just when our ancestors needed it, Chris. And what about the simple yet splendid and wonderful miracle of God feeding our ancestors during 40 years in the desert with Hamantaschen sent from heaven? What? You doubt me? I appeal to the authority of the Bible and the teachings of the great sage Maimonides on the divine attributes. We are told that God sent Hamantaschen from heaven to sustain those sojourning. Now, of course, the word Hamantaschen is a translation of the word manna, which is the word that we generally use in speaking of the miracle of the feeding of the ancestors in the desert. Yet, what was manna, I ask you? Here, interpretation is required. What we do in my course. Now, it's generally said that manna was a kind of bread. But now we must ask, what kind of bread? Surely it wasn't tasteless, plain white bread. Would a loving and merciful God feed his chosen people on Wonder Bread? Heavens no. Interpreted in the light of the attributes of God, as taught to us by Maimonides. Rabbi Eitan and Rabbi Eli, be my witnesses now. We can only judge that a loving and merciful God would feed his people on a tasteful bread, a sweet bread, a bread adorned with fillings made from many wonderful fruits of his creation, prune, apricot, raspberry, strawberry, and so forth. Indeed, it would be an offense to the name of God to suppose him to be so stingy and uncaring that he would feed his chosen people with anything less than the sweetness of the Hamantaschen. He certainly would not feed them Wonder Bread, nor would he feed them on oily potatoes. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say the word oily. It just slipped out. Please notice, though, that I didn't say latkes in speaking of oily potatoes. Shalom.
Hello. So they call this the Latke-Hamentaschen Debate. But to me, there is no debate. Even the most cursory glance at the facts, the kind of glance that I assume my opponents have given them, or the kind of glance you might give your readings in your constitutional interpretation class, obviously point towards the superiority of the latke. Which one is mentioned more heavily in rabbinic literature? The latke. Which one is flexible as both sweet and savory? The latke. Which one is the national dish of Belarus? The latke. Which one has ever been filled with prunes? Not the latke. Now, most people would never go beyond these facts, but I did. I took a glance at where each dollar spent on Hamantaschen goes. Now you can see about 14% is spent on ingredients. That makes sense. Advertising, 8%. That's a lot of overhead. A lot of advertising for that. 21% goes to building the Keystone XL pipeline. Another 20% for hate speech. 16% for pro-malaria lobbying. And, of course, the remaining 23% for puppy eradication. Now, I believe with these facts, we can see that the debate is settled. The question in front of me is now not latke or Hamantaschen, but who would still represent Hamantaschen knowing these things? My question is, what do we know about Team Hamantaschen? They seem like nice gentlemen, but when you take a closer look, the questions start appearing. Now, let's start with my good friend, Alex Moss. what do we know about Alex Moss? Well, he's likable, for sure. He's definitely intelligent. His name is Alex. He seems like a regular guy. But now, something strange presents itself. So when this fellow tells you should prefer Hamantaschen, should you believe him? I'll leave you to decide. Now, what about our good friend, Professor George? Well, he is friendly, of course. He's well respected. He's helpful. Another word for that is assiduous. He looks like a guy who could be an uncle. And he studies jurisprudence. Now, I won't draw the lines for you, but I think you can draw them yourself. Now, I won't leave you with speculation. I will actually reveal a very personal piece of information. My friends, last night I seduced Alex Moss. And in the most tender moments of our romantic tryst, he revealed to me some very personal information. Luckily, I recorded it all, and I will dramatically reenact it for you. I never knew you felt this way. I never knew you felt this way. I hate that we have to go against each other tomorrow. Me too. The whole thing's a sham, you know. But Professor George and I will say, it's all lies. Could you say that again, clearly, enunciated? It's all lies. We're both in the pocket of big Hamantaschen. They said I could ride on their speedboat if I defended them. I am so corrupt. I understand, and I love you anyway. Wait, why do you have your phone out? Are you recording this? No, I'm waiting for a text from my dentist. Oh, I know you have a very close relationship with your dentist. He's kind of like my second father. And then the rest of this. Yeah, this is not as important. Right. So if facts will not convince you, perhaps emotions will, and I will leave you with the words that stir my heart and soul whenever I behold that Latke. And it goes something like this. Oh, great humans, from Gandhi to an Otto from a Bismarck named Otto, they give glory to you, oh great potato. Symbol of Hanukkah, the festival of light. The first miracle was oil, the second comes when you take a bite. No food gives such pleasure, no food gives such joy, even to me, the most goyish of goys. For even a taste of your starch fried in oil, I would brave the hand of a very clumsy moil. Now come, my friends, let us put an end most hasty to Purim's pitiful attempt at a pastry, and then we shall undo this schism and all devour together the finest food of holiday Judaism. Now anyone who says they prefer Hamantaschen must be joking. Yes, they are joshin'. No one's heard the word joshin' used like that before. Never mind. But I trust that those who say I trust that those who say they like Hamantaschen will do what they oughtka. They will vote for the truth. Yes, they will vote Latke. Thank you.
When you have a clip-on mic, that's how you know you've made it. I'm gonna go. Is that like okay? Adam, do it for me. I got it.
Okay.
Higher?
Yeah, that's bad. That's bad, but okay.
Look up here. This is too much. He tied my tie also. That's not a joke. There you go, buddy. That's why it's a little long. Anyway, I guess the first thing I'd like to do, I'd also like to start off with some, ooh, this is neat. I'd also like to start off with a couple of facts and figures. Is this good, this microphone? Everybody can hear me? Fantastic. Like Adam, who had a pie chart, he was good. He was all about. He knew what he wanted to say, and that was fantastic. I'll start off with this. Did you know that in a 2012 survey of average Americans, Hamantaschen was voted the third most enjoyable food, behind only pizza and latkes? Wait, no, okay. All right, hold on. Okay, wait. In 2008, the American Medical Association ruled that Hamantaschen, quote, posed only a moderate long-term health risk to consumers, unquote. All right, good. Let's see. I have a multimedia portion. I also have a multimedia portion. It's great. It's good. Is it up there? Yeah. Oh, it's my famous presentation. It's got a good title. It's also an acrostic. What is the correct distance for this mic? Like right here? That's good. All right. So it's an acrostic. It goes like this. H, hello. A, and. M, miracles. A, and. N, never. T, trouble. A, and. H, hello. O, no. Okay, segue. Okay, great. You know what? I'm gonna shut it off. I don't need. I'm gonna do a casual thing. Oh, I can't take off my coat because the thing's there. Shoot, I was gonna like take it off and like roll my sleeves up and like loosen my tie. That's all right. So I'm with you now. I'm doing this one from the heart. But I got another one right here, so it's cool. Now, I may not know much about numbers and facts and figures or computer algorithms or PowerPoints, but I may just be a good old boy from the eastern end of Long Island, but I don't need a degree in calculating to know I'm a Hamantaschen man. I've been asking around about latkes, and you know what I've found? Not a single person has a bad thing to say. Everybody likes latkes. Everybody likes latkes because they don't get in your face. You know what you're getting. It's right there. It's just sitting there, and there's no depth. There's no danger. I'm looking at you. I see you out there. I know you. I know your emptiness. I know most nights you wake up drenched in sweat and wonder to yourself, is this all there is? And you go to work and you talk about the weather, and yeah, okay, you eat tray after tray of lukewarm latkes. Hundreds of them, and they're spilling out of your mouth. And you're thinking to yourself, this time, latkes will fill the void. But latkes don't know about filling. Oh, sure, they might understand it intellectually, like my, smart Rhodes Scholar guy, him. What's your name? I know his name. I know it so well. But they might understand it intellectually, but they don't understand it on a soul level because they've never been there. You know who has been there? Hamantaschen's been there. Hamantaschen, like you and like these United States, contains multitudes. I look at the middle of Hamantaschen and I see possibility, chaos, wonder. A lot can go wrong with Hamantaschen. A lot could go very, very wrong, but a lot could go right, too. It could be apricot in there. It could be dulce de leche. It could be burnt and taste pretty bad. It could be $40,000 worth of pure gold. It could be all the self-confidence you've ever needed or ever will. You can't be sure, and that's what's so beautiful about it. I look at latkes and I feel sure. But I feel bored. I see what? Reliability? The Honda Civic of historically Jewish food? Reliability is good in some things. I'm thinking of airplanes specifically. Or chainsaws. But nobody except for that guy a couple years ago who ate an airplane bit by bit, if you remember him. It was a pretty cool story. Besides him, nobody eats airplanes. And people do eat Hamantaschen. I'm gonna close with a story, an anecdote from my youth. It's about SeaWorld, a trip I took to SeaWorld. I was a young child full of promise. Back in those days, SeaWorld was full of all sorts of colorful characters. Apple Andy with his apples, Fiddlin' Paul, always fiddlin'. They're all gone now, thanks to gentrification. It was a hot one. Labor Day, 1996. Operation Desert Storm was but a gleam in Clinton's eye. And up to me comes this guy we used to call Dangerous John, on account of he looked pretty dangerous. And that's all that I have on that paper. And Dangerous John, his pockets were full of Hamantaschen. And he was crazy. He had a couple diseases. And he was handing them out. He was handing them out. And I was with my mother, and we were doing stuff that people raised in a neighborhood, you know, with some diversity, with Jews, with, you know, how many of your 1,400 people, I wonder, are you know, I think I was the first Jew you knew. No? He was always, well, that's wrong. I'm wrong, you'll get to know that about me. And he was handing out this Hamantaschen, and my mother said to me, don't take it, be safe, be a Latke man, prepare harder for this presentation so that it's not weird and people aren't uncomfortable, because that's what a Latke man would do. And I said no. I said, I'm gonna take Dangerous John's Hamantaschen and I'm gonna eat it. And it was good. And I touched the sun that day. And I wouldn't have done it if I were a Latke man, because a Latke man will be solid, but a Hamantaschen man will be either great or terrible. I hope I've been one of these today. Thank you.
All right, we now have about 15 minutes for questions from the audience for either of our two teams. None? I will start off with one, and I'll direct this to the Latke team. That is, the Hamantaschen team included a reference to biblical authority in their argument. And I wonder whether or not you have any response to that.
Well, you know, to invoke the Bible, to invoke the Torah, in a debate of this sort, a fun debate, could be appropriate. It could be appropriate, but I preferred not to do that, not to go down that path, and I felt there was enough to discuss in terms of American culture and Jewish culture to talk about the importance of the Latke on its own.
I thank you for that sort of reply to my question. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, we do have a question back here. Let me ask the audience, what do we need to do with the mics? Do you need either for, I'm not going to pass around the lavalier mic, I tell you that. We don't need mic, okay.
This is Professor Zeilzer. It's a two-part question. First of all, are you happy with where you are today in your life? And second of all, would you have gotten there if you never took any risks?
If you never what? That's if I never took any risks. Am I happy where I am in my life? And if I didn't take, would I be here if I didn't take any risks? I'm very happy. I mean, it's a real honor to be here at Princeton having this debate. When I told my father I was doing this, I said, I'm having this debate about the Hamantaschen and Latke, and he's like, what? And then I'm saying, I'm doing it with Rabbi George, even better. And he's like, who's Rabbi George? What So how can I not be happy to be sitting with Rabbi George having this? But I am a risk taker, and I think the idea, while I respect my colleagues, that, cooking latkes in hot oil, which springs out at you simply with the passion of feeding your family, is not full of risk, doesn't fully appreciate the cooking process. So.
Yes, here in the front.
I have a question for the Hamantaschen team. So, you often mention, when you mention filling, you mentioned prune filling as positive. The Latke team mentioned prune filling as negative. I want to know, what are your personal thoughts on prune filling? Is it positive for Hamantaschen or negative for Hamantaschen? What is prune filling? How does it relate?
Well, you know me. I try to find the good in everyone and everything. And the prune is one of God's creations. How can we find anything bad? How can we sink to the level of denigrating a wonderful, sweet, and useful fruit? I would add that I do not, in the slightest, fault my friends on the other side for not invoking biblical authority. If I were on the Latke side, I wouldn't invoke it either. It could only hurt when we realize that there is no biblical authority for it. So as an admirer of excellent rhetoric and oratory, I want to congratulate the folks on the other side for sticking to their strong points.
I mean, I could eat prunes all day. I mean, you could bring me a plate of 100 prunes right now. I'd eat it in front of you and maintain eye contact with you the whole time.
They're a great antidote to airplanes.
And not only that, but they're one choice of many. If you don't want prunes in your Hamantaschen, you don't need prunes in your Hamantaschen. There's so many other avenues. That's really the distinction for me.
Yes.
Professor George, you invoked the good and usefulness of fruit and God's creations. I think the original Hamantaschen was in fact poppy, and poppies are useful for heroin.
I try to find. I didn't hear the last part. I didn't hear the last part. Okay, we didn't get the last part, but I try to find the good in everything, and where I can't find good in something, I follow my mother's advice to say nothing.
I will say
it is true, of course, though. The Medellin Hamantaschen / prune cartel has done a lot of bad things. And
Yeah.
This is a question for Professor George, so either can take it. Would you support the marriage between two Hamantaschen?
I say with the French, vive la différence. There is a place for the latke, and the place of the latke is to be complementary to the Hamantaschen. Equal in dignity, but not in taste.
You know, one of the great things I have to say about the latke, and I would stand this is more than the Hamantaschen. The latke has been integrated throughout many parts of American culture from the very start of the 20th century. True story, Aunt Jemima made a latke mix in like the 1920s or something. There's advertisements for it. So I do think to support the values that Professor George just espoused, one would logically come to the delicacy you could find in any kind of restaurant at this point in American history. Who goes into an Italian restaurant and sees a Hamantaschen? Nobody. But a latke you might find.
You go to a different Italian restaurant.
Okay, any further questions, or are people ready to proceed to the vote? What? Oh, up here, it's on.
So Professor Zeilzer mentioned the deep divisions and polarization between the Latke Party and the Hamantaschen supporters, but can you both at least agree on matzo ball soup? Something to bring us together finally.
I can do that. I think that's a nice note to bring into the discussion. And I think matzo ball soup, especially with a little latke on the side. Hamantaschen.
If we're talking about floaters, I'm with you, brother.
Yes.
There's a question for both teams. Could you relate your treat to the concept of the USDA food pyramid?
Related to the food pyramid. The Hamantaschen is a triangle.
Said the man who hasn't looked at the USDA promotional materials since 1996. It's a plate now. A plate is circular.
That's a recent change, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding it.
Loosely circular. I would say, look, you peel back the propaganda paid for by big food, and you're going to find a base of Hamantaschen. And everything else you won't find because it's sunk into the Hamantaschen.
Well, on these food pyramids, I don't know what this USDA is, but I can tell you that on this on this point, I have to invoke the authority of our esteemed First Lady, especially when it comes to the prune Hamantaschen as opposed to the latke. Think about it.
Any questions, including clarification of my last claim? Okay, I'm seeing no. What? Yes? No? Thought I saw a bid for a question in the back. If not, before we proceed to the vote, let me ask you all to give a round of applause to this extraordinary team. Okay, we have a special voting protocol. Fortunately, I was about to call for a vote. In fact, we have ballots. And the white one is? Latke. White one is Latke. Making the lavender one the Hamantaschen team. So you will take a ballot as you walk out of the doors and you will deposit it where? In the bowl. And then the votes will be counted and our winners will be determined. But I would say never have the extraordinary issues of the latke and the Hamantaschen been so profoundly joined as they were today. And I'm grateful to our team and our audience for a wonderful debate. Thank you.